The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The Beth Messiah congregation invites you to come and experience a Messianic Roots biblically based congregational fellowship as we observe God's Shabbat in Messiah Yeshua. Praise and worship services begin at 10:30 a.m., followed by an Oneg Shabbat meal mid-Rosh and fellowship. Beth Messiah congregation is located at 8333 Acoma Way in North Denver. You can find out more information by calling 1-800-205-6245. Everyone's welcome, so join us this Shabbat. And Shabbat Shalom, good Sabbath. Whether you're in automotive, sporting goods, hardware, health, wellness, electrical, electronics, construction, carpet cleaning, legal, or animal care, and offer exceptional customer service and provide quality services or goods, you're honest, reliable, and professional. If you have a business, we have the customers. Let us put you in touch with our loyal, supportive, and dedicated listeners today. They're waiting to hear from you. It's inexpensive. It's effective. Call KHNC at 1-800-205-6245.
Economic threats that we were not even talking about at the beginning of the summer. More than half of all Americans are at least partially dependent on the government. Jacob Rothschild, John Paulson, and George Soros are all betting that financial disaster is coming. Startling evidence that central banks and Wall Street insiders are rapidly preparing for something big. 22 stats that show how the emerging one-world economy is absolutely killing American workers. The Mississippi River is drying up. You will not believe what some people are willing to do for a paycheck these days. Are the government and the big banks quietly preparing for an imminent financial collapse? 11 things that can happen when you allow your country to become enslaved to the bankers. The sobering reality of what life is like in Reno, Nevada. Thanks, Obama. Here are 24 stats that show how much you've royally messed up our economy. 40 points that prove Barack Obama and Mitt Romney are essentially the same candidate. U.S. super soldiers of the future will be genetically modified transhumans capable of superhuman feats. More than 100 million Americans are on welfare, completely surrounded by psychopaths and sociopaths as we approach the edge of societal collapse. 65-year-old woman with a gun chases off 5 armed robbers. Only 24.6% of all jobs in the United States are good jobs. They really do want to implant microchips into your brain. Historic drought, giant dust storms, and massive power grid failures, a glimpse into our future, flash mob crimes, and organized looting have become a normal part of life in America. My friends, today, on the 4th anniversary of the Real Truth radio show, we'll talk to the man behind all of those headlines. My name's Howard Riell, and this is Real Truth. You're listening to the American Freedom Network, streaming live around the world at AmericanNewsNet.com and on Facebook and on Real TV and in the book Real Truth, Stay Angry. And, of course, as always, broadcasting out across the Colorado Front Range on KHNC, Johnstown, Colorado, 1360 AM The Lion. Our call-in number, 877-254-7524. Michael T. Snyder is a graduate of the McIntire School of Commerce at the University of Virginia and has a J.D. and an LLM from the University of Florida Law School. He worked as an attorney for some of the largest and most prominent law firms in Washington, D.C., and is now a very active blogger, researcher, writer, speaker, and activist. My friends, just about every single day that I'm on the air, you hear at least one item from me from the Economic Collapse blog and the End of the American Dream blog, both blogs founded, written, edited by Michael Snyder, who is my guest right now. Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Howard. That was quite an introduction. It's a real honor to be back on the show, and it's a real honor to be here on your anniversary show.
Well, the honor is mine and ours on behalf of all my listeners. You know, when I put your items on my Facebook page, Real Truth Radio, and when I read them on my show, I get comments from people saying, What's the matter with you? Why are you always so depressing? You're always giving us bad news. I see it as just the opposite, because you can't cure what ails you unless you know what ails you. Do you view yourself as a gloomy Gus, Michael?
Oh, absolutely not. I've been accused of being a gloomer and a doomer, but I don't see it that way at all. Rather, when you go to the doctor, if you go to the doctor and the doctor gives you a purple pill, are you going to just take the purple pill? No, you're going to know what it's for. What's wrong with you first? So that's what I see my role as doing. My role, I'm standing up on the wall as a watchman. I see the storm clouds coming. I see, all these problems, and I'm trying to warn the people as best that I can, as you are doing and so many other people out there are doing as well, trying to get the American people to wake up and realize just how big our problems are, just how far we have fallen, just how dramatically we have rejected the principles this country is founded on. And we've gone a long way down a very bad direction, and we need to take a very clear look at ourselves in the mirror and say, okay, this is how bad things have really gotten. In essence, what we need is a huge intervention. We need this country to admit how bad things have gotten, how bad things are going to get if we don't turn things around. And so, once people wake up, then they're willing to accept some of the solutions potentially.
It's interesting you refer to yourself as a watchman. I was originally going to open the show today with that quote that you're referring to from the prophet Ezekiel, where God says, I'm appointing you a watchman. It's your job to warn people. If they hear your warning and they don't do anything, it's their fault. But if you don't even give them a warning, then it's your fault. So you and I, and as you say, lots of people today, thank goodness, are watchmen standing on the wall warning people that the bad guys are coming. You're talking about people not realizing exactly how bad things have gotten. Let me ask you this. How bad have things gotten?
Well, when you look at our country today, we've got, as you mentioned at the top, one of the headlines in a recent article I put together was that there are more than 100 million Americans today that are on welfare. And the federal government runs more than 80 different means-tested welfare programs that does not even include Medicare or Social Security. But you've got more than 100 million Americans on programs like food stamps. You've got 46 million in that program alone. You've got Medicaid. You've got nearly 50 million on Medicaid. And that's just two of the programs. So you've got about a third of the country on these welfare programs. Then you have tens of millions on Social Security, tens of millions on Medicare. You've got, when you add up all levels of government, state, local, federal government, you've got about 22 million government employees. And so when you total all of that up, it comes to, according to Forbes magazine, it comes to more than 160 million Americans that are at least partially financially dependent on the federal government. And this is not sustainable. And this is the reason we're running up so much debt, because we're trying to keep the system going, trying to continue to allow all these people to be dependent, but we're running up trillion-dollar deficits on the federal level every single year. Since Jimmy Carter was elected, the U.S. national debt has gotten more than 22 times larger. We've got runaway debt, we've got runaway government dependence, and that's just one of the problems we're facing as a nation.
Well, we're about to go to the commercial. I want to talk to you when we come back about whether or not the system is inherently so broken or so misguided that we're not able to fix it. And the one column that you've done in the last week and a half that really knocked me on my backside, 40 ways that Obama and Romney are essentially the same candidate. My friends, Michael Snyder of the Economic Collapse blog is my guest today on the 4th anniversary of Real Truth. Go nowhere, because we'll be right back.
He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 10 through 13.
the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Restore Health and Counseling salutes the men and women in uniform who've answered the call for our freedoms. Let's give them the hero's welcome they deserve, as they have fought hard to restore peace. America's troops are our angels of protection, so stand up and salute them proudly. That's from Restore Health and Counseling at 4705 Paris Street, serving Northeast Denver with complete substance abuse counseling for adolescent to adult and for private as well as professional drug, alcohol screening and treatment and rehabilitation. Visit us at www.rhctherapy.com or call 303-373-1188. CINN Stations in Alt salutes our troops. Whether you're for the war or against it, they're still there. These men and women deserve more than our support. They deserve the comfort of home. Send a military care package today. Just type military care package into a search engine, point, and click. Let's show our troops we care. This message from CINN Stations in Alt, wishing Godspeed to our fighting men and women and thanking them for their triumphs and their sacrifices.
My friends, welcome back to Real Truth. My special guest today, Michael Snyder, the founder and editor of the Economic Collapse blog and the End of the American Dream blog. Our call-in number, 877-254-7524. Michael, between money in politics, corporate control, military control, the media in cahoots with anything the power structure wants to do, widespread corruption, is the system itself too intractable and basically too broken for us to have a realistic shot at fixing things?
Unfortunately, I believe that it is. At least in the short term, I believe that both political parties are deeply corrupt and controlled by the elite and the big corporate interests. I believe that Barack Obama and Mitt Romney are very, very similar, and we'll get into that. I believe that we've never had two candidates more similar running for president in a national election. And I believe that there's not really any hope on the horizon that the great financial crisis, which is rapidly approaching, will be averted. That's why I encourage people to focus on solutions on a family level, on a community level, because the federal government's not going to come in and save us. Barack Obama's not going to save us. Mitt Romney is not going to save us. In fact, the article you mentioned, I listed 40 points which talked about how they are incredibly similar, because when the mainstream media talks about Mitt Romney as this big conservative, but the truth is when he was governor of Massachusetts, he was extremely liberal, and basically everything he did was very liberal. So both Barack Obama and Mitt Romney have a long track record of being very, very liberal, taking America down a very similar path. And even what they're saying now, yeah, Mitt Romney says some things that'll tickle the ears of the conservatives, and Barack Obama will say some things that'll tickle the ears of the liberals. But when you dig down and dig into their core positions, they're very, very similar.
And what's so interesting is if you were talking now not to me but to Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity, they would tell you you're crazy, that they are polar opposites, but that's not even close. I mentioned that to Ron Paul when he was on the show a ways back, and he just kind of chuckled and he said, well, Rush has got a product and he's trying to sell it, and what he and Hannity and the others are selling is the old paradigm, Democrat versus Republican. It just doesn't work that way anymore, does it?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And I talk to a lot of my conservative friends these days, and they say, well, they know the country is going to go down the tubes if Mitt Romney is elected, but they say, well, it might go down the tubes a little less slowly. It's just kind of a very depressing thought. But if you look at these two guys, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, they both supported TARP. They both supported Barack Obama's economic stimulus packages. And Mitt Romney actually says that the auto industry bailout that Barack Obama did was actually Romney's idea, which is kind of bizarre. But and if you look at their plans for federal spending, neither of them plans to balance the budget next year or the year after that. They both plan to keep running up more debt. Now, maybe Romney would run a little bit less debt than Obama, but they both plan to continue running up huge amounts of debt. Both have a track record of being big spenders while in office. Obama, obviously, if you look at Mitt Romney in Massachusetts, he hugely increased government spending. Both fully support the Federal Reserve. Both are on record as saying the independence of the Federal Reserve should not be messed with. And when Ben Bernanke was up for renomination last time, both of them supported him being renominated. Now, this time, Mitt Romney has suggested that he may not support it, Ben Bernanke, for another term, but actually one of Romney's biggest economic advisors came out the other day and said, well, you know what, maybe Ben Bernanke does deserve another term, so who knows what Romney would do. But, they've just been so similar on so many issues. Or if you look at health care, Obamacare, Mitt Romney's promising to get rid of Obamacare, but the truth is when he was governor of Massachusetts, he was a big promoter of universal health care, and Obamacare was basically based to a large degree on Romney Care, on the plan that Mitt Romney put into Massachusetts. So there's all these similarities there. The similarities are a lot more than the differences, unfortunately.
What it makes me think of is a couple of elections back when George Bush was running against John Kerry, and surprise, surprise, it turned out they're cousins. It's like, what are the odds in a country of 300 million plus people that two cousins would end up as the candidates? And what are the odds that two candidates now should end up so absolutely similar to each other on almost all the major issues? It kind of indicates that there's really one hand behind the curtain controlling both of them, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I was very frustrated because the whole Republican primary season, it was about how much the Republican voters disliked Barack Obama. But then out of all the Republican candidates running, they went and selected the candidate that is most similar to Obama to run against him. So that just made me very frustrated with the Republican Party. But, you look at these candidates, and Wall Street is absolutely showering both candidates with campaign contributions. You look at Obama in 2008, some of the biggest donors were names like Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan. And now you look at Romney's campaign, you see many of the same big Wall Street banks showing up as the biggest donors to his campaign. Neither of them wants to do away with the income tax. Neither one of them wants to shut down the IRS. In fact, both candidates they argue about should we raise taxes on the very wealthy, but both Obama and Romney want to keep the income tax rates the same at the same levels as they are right now for the vast majority of Americans, for poor Americans, middle class Americans. So they don't plan to lower our taxes. And then if you look at personal liberties, both candidates believe that the TSA is doing a great job. Both supported the NDAA. Both supported the renewal of the Patriot Act. Both Obama and Romney believe that the federal government should be able to detain American citizens that are considered to be terrorists indefinitely without a trial. So, there's so much similar about these two guys. Of course, the media plays up the differences, but the truth is that there are dozens of similarities between these two guys.
And when someone happens along like Ron Paul, he is marginalized, silenced, ridiculed, and the media is in lockstep. And so a guy like Ron Paul never really had a shot at getting the nomination. Now, I know you go on the Internet and you'll find a whole bunch of people saying he's going to somehow show up in Tampa this Sunday and walk away with the nomination. I don't see that happening. But the fact that someone who's not owned by the power establishment and the power elite, he doesn't even have a shot anymore. And that means that we, the American people, don't really have a choice anymore, right?
Oh, it's true. It's a false choice. It's an illusion. Both of these guys earned a degree from Harvard University. They both believe in man-made global warming. They both believe in a cap-and-trade carbon tax scheme. Mitt Romney will only go along with it as long as the entire world gets behind it. But they both, if the entire world supports it, both Obama and Romney said, yeah, if the whole world goes along, we'll go along with that. They both have a history of supporting strict gun control measures. And then if you look, Obama, of course, is nominated a whole slew of liberal judges. If you look at what Romney did in Massachusetts, he was a Republican, but he nominated more Democrats to the bench than he did Republicans. So, there's not a real choice. They're both going to take us down the exact same direction. Neither of them is going to stand up to the Federal Reserve. Neither of them are going to do the kind of radical reconstructive surgery that we need as a nation. One might tweak a few things here and there, and the other one might have a slightly different approach, but the truth is they're cut from the same cloth. They're very, very similar, and they're going to take us down a very similar path no matter who's elected. That's why I tell people, we're pretty much guaranteed Obama's second term no matter how the election turns out.
Oh, is that an unappetizing thought? You mentioned the bankers, and you write an awful lot about banks. One of the more recent headlines on economic collapse, startling evidence that central banks and Wall Street insiders are rapidly preparing for something big. What are they doing to prepare, and what is that something big that they're preparing for?
Well, that's a very good question. There's
only kind I ask, Michael.
Oh, go ahead.
That's the only kind of question I ask.
Well, what I've been noticing over the past few weeks is all kind of clues have started to pop up that kind of show that the governments, the big banks, the financial insiders, they're all making moves to get prepared for something. For example, it came out that George Soros, during the second quarter of this year, 2012, he put about $130 million into gold. But George Soros is not the only one doing this. John Paulson, your listeners might remember him as the big hedge fund manager that bet wildly against the U.S. housing market back when the subprime mortgage meltdown happened back in 2008. He made about $20 billion by betting against the U.S. housing market. Well, what is he doing now? Now he's putting a massive amount of money into gold. About just in the second quarter alone, he put about $700 million more into gold. But it's not just those guys hoarding gold. It's also the central banks of the world. During the second quarter of 2012, the central banks of the world were net buyers of 157.5 metric tons of gold. Now, this is highly unusual because before 2009, for about 20 years, the central banks of the world were net sellers of gold. In other words, they were selling more gold than they were buying. In 2009, that changed, and they started buying more gold than they were selling. And now in this last quarter, we saw them buy more gold in a single quarter than we've ever seen before. So they're accumulating unprecedented amounts of gold. Why is this happening?
It's got to be because they know that the fiat currency that we use is about to bottom out and become worth next to nothing, so they want gold, which has an intrinsic value. Am I close?
Yeah, I think you accumulate gold if you anticipate that financial chaos, if the fiat currencies are going to be in trouble. So I think that plays into it. And in fact, big bets are being made against fiat currencies like the euro. Just the other day, there were headlines in the financial papers about how Jacob Rothschild of the Rothschild banking dynasty has made a huge bet against the euro. In fact, it's to the tune. Let me see if I can find the exact figure here. But it's about he has bet about $200 million against the euro. And John Paulson, who I just mentioned earlier, he's also made huge bets against the euro. So they're betting the euro is going to fall and crash as the eurozone kind of comes apart. And they're betting on the fact that gold is going to go up. And these guys, they have much more connections to the financial world, to the financial system than we do. We don't know what goes on behind closed doors or what's whispered in the corporate boardrooms. But these guys, you don't want to listen to what they say. You want to watch what they're doing with their money. And they're obviously preparing for something. But it's not just them. Over the past 12 months, more than 600 key banking executives all over the world have resigned from their positions. It's been highly unusual, and some people have been documenting this, how it just seems like the rats are leaving the sinking ships. And so what are they doing? Well, I've got a friend up here in Idaho where I live who sells properties, is involved in selling properties, and according to him, a whole bunch of Wall Street bankers from Wall Street, are coming out here this summer and are shopping for prepper properties, places that they can go when things hit the fan and everything starts falling apart. And so that was another huge red flag for me. I was like, why are so many Wall Street bankers interested in coming out to Idaho? But all these things kind of point to the fact that, the insiders are thinking that there's not too much more time before things really start falling to pieces.
And that's exactly what we're going to talk about when we come back from this commercial break. My friends, more Real Truth ahead. Go absolutely, positively nowhere. We'll be back.
If you're spending hard-earned money on supplements, you need to know about BioSuperfood because you're probably shortchanging yourself on nutrition and value. If you're buying products claiming to provide DNA protection from radiation, you're getting ripped off by inferior copycat products because there's no other product developed or researched like BioSuperfood. BioSuperfood is one complete superfood product that addresses radiation poisoning, allergies, arthritis, diabetes, high blood pressure, and other degenerative diseases. BioSuperfood helps digestion, decreases pain and inflammation, increases flexibility, improves heart health and brain function. It boosts your immune system and even inhibits the AIDS virus and cancerous cells. It's an antibacterial, antifungal, and anti-inflammatory. BioSuperfood is not another supplement. It's a whole food and contains over 5,000 nutrients. Call now and ask about your special discounts on your BioSuperfood purchase at 303-257-7576. That's 303-257-7576 or biosuperfood@hotmail.com.
11 years ago, when my uncle started the Patriot Trading Group, gas was 75 cents a gallon. We were running an alleged budget surplus, and the total national debt was $5 trillion, and the government was forecasting the debt would be eliminated by 2010. And I thought my uncle was a wacko with tinfoil on his head. Well, I owned tech stocks, certain to become a millionaire before the millennium rolled over. Since then, the debt has doubled, jobs are heading overseas, and 100,000 people have joined Eric with tinfoil on their heads. I'm Joe Jaquin, Vice President for the Patriot Trading Group, and as gold and silver have doubled and even tripled during the first 11 years, the issues facing this country over the next 11 years look far worse. Call the Patriot Trading Group at 800-951-0592. We offer all forms of gold, silver, platinum, and palladium, shipped and delivered at the most competitive prices in the country. Call us, 800-951-0592, or check out our website at allamericangold.com. And remember, you don't need to have tinfoil to own gold and silver.
The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He makes the plans of the peoples of no effect. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he has chosen as his own inheritance. Psalm 33, verses 10 through 12.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. This is the America News Network.
Welcome back to Real Truth. My special guest today, Michael Snyder, founder and editor of the Economic Collapse and End of the American Dream blogs. Michael, you talked before we went to commercial about society coming apart, and I think the evidence is unmistakable. I'm looking at headlines of yours, such as completely surrounded by psychopaths and sociopaths as we approach the edge of societal collapse. I'm looking at one that says flash mob crimes and organized looting have become a normal part of life in America. You have chronicled very succinctly and very convincingly life in Reno, Nevada, life in Detroit, life in other small towns. We are receding into another dark ages. Why?
Well, a big part of it is because there aren't enough jobs. Millions of our jobs have been shipped overseas. American workers have to compete against people that are being paid slave labor wages on the other side of the world, and big corporations are taking jobs where they'd have to pay American workers $10 or $15 here, taking them to the other side of the world where they can pay workers $1 an hour with no benefits, and then the big corporate fat cats can pocket the difference and pad their bonuses. And so we're seeing places like Detroit, which was once one of the greatest middle-class cities in the world. It was thriving, it was booming, the auto industry, everything else. Now Detroit is falling apart. It's becoming a war-torn, drug-infested mess, war zone. But you have a whole bunch of other cities like that. You got places like Baltimore. You've got places like Chicago. In Chicago now, these flash mob robberies happen so frequently that they hardly make the news anymore. You know, where you've got 20, 30 teens that gather together, they storm into a store, they grab whatever they want, the clerk, whoever's working there, is just overwhelmed, then the group of teens just storms right back out, never to be heard from again. You know, when we see this type of organized looting, these types of mobs coming together, you know, we never saw this kind of thing happen in America before. In fact, down in Jacksonville, Florida, a while back, earlier in the summer, in July, there was a group of about 300 teens that invaded a Walmart one evening. So, you know, when we see groups of people start to get together like this and no concern for the rule of law, that's kind of frightening.
It's kind of frightening. It sure as hell is. 65-year-old woman with a gun chases off 5 armed robbers. You know, many times on the show I've mentioned that song by, what's his name, Chris Cornell, from the James Bond movie, Casino Royale. He says, arm yourself because no one else here will save you. And that's what it's come to. The only time we see police is when they're shutting down lemonade stands or tasing senior citizens or the handicapped.
Oh, absolutely. The authorities don't seem to care about us, or they'll come after all the damage is done and they'll take down a report. But, you know, if there would have been one person that was armed and trained and he could have taken down James Holmes, the crazy shooter in Colorado, before he shot a whole bunch more people. But, you know, we're not trained to think that way. We're trained to let the government take care of everything. But the government's not concerned about the crime that's happening in our streets or in our homes. In fact, in some parts of the country today, you'll be lucky if you can even get the police to come out after the crime has happened to take down a report. Sometimes they won't even come out for that because they'll say, well, there's nothing we can do. And they're cutting back police forces all over the country. Meanwhile, what the government is extremely concerned about is concerned about, you know, apparently about what we believe. There was the case of the former Marine named Brandon Raub the other day, where he was hauled off to a mental institution because of what he posted on his Facebook page. Well, fortunately now it looks like a judge has stepped in and said they've got to release him. You know, thankfully he had a good lawyer and so forth. But it's scary to think that the authorities could show up at your door, not officially arrest you, not charge you with anything, but simply drag you off to a mental facility just for posting your free speech on the internet.
Yeah. I always thought that the T in TSA stood for transportation, And yet there they were a few days ago at a Paul Ryan political event. And when I saw that item, I just shook my head. What the hell is TSA doing here? What are they doing at senior proms? What are they doing in bus stations and train stations? It is every dystopian nightmare coming true, and it's just gathering speed as we're going to hit these Republican and Democratic conventions. It's just going to get ramped up, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. These TSA Viper teams, that's actually what they're called, VIPR teams, they do thousands of unannounced security screenings all over the nation today. Like you mentioned, subway stations, bus terminals, ports, highway rest stops. And in fact, TSA agents I've read have been brought into high school proms to do screenings. So we're turning into this police state where everyone's a potential terrorist, everyone's a potential threat. You know, we're basically going to put the whole country on security lockdown. You know, in order to make us all feel a little bit safer. Of course, it's not making us that much safer, but what it is taking away our liberties and our freedoms.
Well, you've seen the same videos I have, I'm sure. Police with dogs, drug-sniffing dogs walking through schools, junior high schools, elementary schools, high schools. The kids sitting on the floor, all the lockers being open. They're opening their bags so the security people and the police can look. We're hearing about children being arrested, led out of school in handcuffs for minor offenses. Some kid drew a picture, a stick figure of someone holding a gun. He was arrested and suspended. It's like something out of George Orwell. And then we're reading articles, and I know you're reading the same stuff I'm reading. Federal agencies are buying tens of millions of rounds of ammunition. There was a general in the news a couple of days ago who said, well, who could they be planning on using it on except for us? There are people posting videos of military transports, of tanks being moved on trains, of FEMA camps that are being prepared for large-scale population. It certainly looks like the police state is moving into high gear, and that they expect to be incarcerating thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Americans in the very near future, or am I being paranoid?
Oh, no, this was another indication that preparations are being made for something big, and we don't know what it is, but when the government is putting out purchase orders for potentially up to one purchase order was for up to 450 million rounds of hollow point bullets. Another one was for up to 750 million rounds. Now, hollow point bullets are designed to do maximum damage to internal organs. They're not for target practice. They're for shooting people and doing as much damage when they hit as possible. So, you know, I could understand, you know, if the military or someone like that needed a lot of ammunition, because you burn through a lot of ammunition fighting a war. But why does Homeland Security need hundreds of millions of rounds of these hollow point bullets? I don't understand it.
Well, I'm afraid that you do understand it, and so do I, and so do our listeners, because they are indeed planning on going to war. My friends, this is Real Truth. We'll be right back.
If catastrophe struck, would your family be prepared? Are you confident you wouldn't react in a panic? Is there one place to get all of your emergency supplies? Ferris Survival encourages you to have confidence through preparation, not panic through crisis. Ferris Survival, located at 3366 South Broadway, is a professional, reputable, full-service business providing quality, realistic preparedness supplies at an affordable price. Go online, stop by, or call 303-781-0343. Ferris Survival. Whether you're in automotive, sporting goods, hardware, health, wellness, electrical, electronics, construction, carpet cleaning, legal, or animal care, and offer exceptional customer service and provide quality services or goods, you're honest, reliable, and professional. If you have a business, we have the customers. Let us put you in touch with our loyal, supportive, and dedicated listeners today. They're waiting to hear from you. It's inexpensive. It's effective. Call KHNC at 1-800-205-6245.
If the IRS has turned your life upside down, Ameristar Tax Centers has a free, no-obligation consultation just for you. With proven experience, our former IRS agents are licensed to contact the IRS immediately for you, stop the collection activity, and get you instant help to relieve you from this burden. We guarantee not to charge you a penny unless we can help. So call for free information now.
800-519-6297. 800-519-6297. 800-519-6297.
And of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, He has declared Him. The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 16.
Folks, welcome back to Real Truth. It's our fourth anniversary. My guest today, Michael Snyder, editor, founder of the Economic Collapse blog, the End of the American Dream blog. The call-in number is 877-254-7524. Michael, it seems so simple. Eventually, just like in Star Trek, the world was going to organize itself into one vast world government, so that all the nations of the world would basically cease to exist and mankind would speak with one voice. You have a recent piece, 22 stats that show how the emerging one-world economy is absolutely killing American workers. This one-world government isn't exactly coming together the way the people who wanted to had envisioned it, is it?
Well, no plan that is developed by men ever comes to fruition perfectly. But I believe we're coming to a point where, this next great economic crisis that's coming, what the global elite like to do is they like to use moments of crisis, moments of chaos, to reshape things in their image and what they would like to see. So I believe that we're going to see this. Right now, the United States is drowning in debt. Over the past 40 years, that if you go back 40 years ago and totaled up all debt, not just the debt of the federal government, but state debt, local government debt, corporate debt, business debt, individual debt, it totaled about $2 trillion about 40 years ago. Now today, we're up to about $55 trillion. So the total amount of debt in this country has gotten more than 27 times larger over the past 40 years. We're living in the greatest debt bubble in the history of the world. We continue to run up debt at an incredible pace, and it's not sustainable. At some point, it's going to come crashing down. And what are the solutions they're going to give us? They're going to give us more globalization, more centralization, more power to international organizations such as the United Nations, the WTO, the IMF, the World Bank. So, every time there's a crisis, every time there's a problem, they say the solution is to merge us even more into this coming global system, and that's the eventual end goal. They want control, eventually they want to get the whole world under their control.
But people don't want it. People in Europe, people in the United States, they don't want one world government, and rightly so. Does it matter what we want anymore or no?
Well, unfortunately, in the world today, it's money that talks, and unfortunately, the U.S. middle class is shrinking. People are just trying so hard to make ends meet. For example, I saw a statistic the other day that 77% of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck at least some of the time. So families, millions upon millions of American families are just trying to figure out how to pay the bills at the end of the month, how to get through one more month, so they don't have time to think a lot about politics or what's happening in the world or things like that. They're just trying to figure out, well, how am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to, get by? A recent survey by the Pew Research Center found that 85% of middle-class Americans say that it is harder to maintain a middle-class lifestyle today than it was 10 years ago. So, because what's happening, there's not enough good jobs. and even people who do have jobs, their incomes are not going up much at all. Meanwhile, the price of everything, electricity, gas, food, and, the things we spend money on every month, they just keep going up and up and up. I just personally, I just got something in the mail that said my health insurance is going up again. All these things are going up. Meanwhile, our incomes are staying the same, so people are feeling more stretched than ever.
One of your most recent items, in fact, I think it just popped up today. Thanks, Obama, here at 24 Stats that show how much you've royally messed up our economy. What are the one or two or three stats in that piece that are the bright red flashing lights in your mind?
Well, one big thing and one thing to take a look at, during the Great Depression, the velocity of money fell through the floor, and the velocity of money is how rapidly money circulates in the economy. If I go to the store and buy something, then the owner of that store, does he take money and spend it on something else? Or when it goes to his employee, does that employee go and spend it on things that he needs? And in a healthy economy, money circulates pretty rapidly. There's a good flow of money through the economy, but what we've seen over the past couple of years is that the velocity of money has plunged to a post-World War II low. That's a sign of a very sick economy. And unfortunately, there's so many things that are paralleling what happened at the beginning of the Great Depression to what's happening now. A lot of the same things are happening. And then if you look at real median household income, it's fallen by more than $4,000 since Barack Obama entered the White House. So household incomes are going down, and like I said, cost of living keeps going up. So, we're a very sick economy. Poverty is exploding. The number of Americans on food stamp has risen by 14 million since Barack Obama has been in the White House. So that's not a sign of a recovery. That's a sign that more Americans than ever are falling into poverty and becoming dependent on the government.
One of the most interesting themes that you've been touching on over the past several weeks, the number of good jobs versus the number of low-paying jobs. There are far fewer good-paying jobs than there used to be, and a much larger percentage of all jobs are now low-paying jobs. What's happening there? Why is that happening? Is that because we've lost our manufacturing base, or we're exporting jobs overseas?
Well, that's a big part of it. We've lost the good-paying manufacturing jobs that enabled people to support a family, and they're being replaced by service jobs where people are working fast food or for these retail stores or, cutting hair or whatever. That's where the growth in the jobs has been. And there was the Center for Economic and Policy Research. They released a paper a couple weeks ago, where they found that only 24.6% of all jobs in our economy can be classified as good jobs at this point, which is kind of sobering. And what you've got today, you've got an economy where 1 out of every 4 American workers makes $10 an hour or less, and you can't support a family on $10 an hour. You can't even support yourself hardly on $10 an hour. And in fact, one statistic that really surprised me is that the United States today has a higher percentage of workers doing low-wage work than any other major industrialized nation does. And part of this is the competition from overseas. We're competing against foreign workers making next to nothing, and that's driving our wages down because we have to compete.
Absolutely. We're going to be back. We'll take one more break, and we'll come back and finish up. This is Real Truth.
Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone into the world. By this you will know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Yeshua, Jesus, has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess that Yeshua, Jesus, has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, which you have already heard was coming and is now already in the world. 1 John 4:1.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution.
The Beth Messiah Congregation invites you to come and experience a Messianic Roots biblically based congregational fellowship as we observe God's Shabbat in Messiah Yeshua. Praise and worship services begin at 10:30 a.m., followed by an Oneg Shabbat meal, mid-Rosh, and fellowship. Beth Messiah Congregation is located at 8333 Acoma Way in North Denver. You can find out more information by calling 1-800-205-6245. Everyone's welcome, so join us this Shabbat. And Shabbat Shalom, good Sabbath. Restore Health and Counseling salutes the men and women in uniform who've answered the call for our freedoms. Let's give them the hero's welcome they deserve as they have fought hard to restore peace. America's troops are our angels of protection, so stand up and salute them proudly. That's from Restore Health and Counseling at 4705 Paris Street, serving Northeast Denver with complete substance abuse counseling for adolescent to adult and for private as well as professional drug, alcohol screening and treatment and rehabilitation. Visit us at www.rhctherapy.com or call 303-373-1188.
Welcome back to Real Truth. My guest has been Michael T. Snyder, founder and editor of the Economic Collapse blog and the End of the American Dream blog. Michael, we've only got about 3.5 minutes left. What are the next columns that you're working on for next week at both of the blogs?
Well, what I'm trying to focus a little bit more on is preparation. You know, now that people know what the problems are, what can they do? There's not going to be a solution on the federal level. The storm is coming. It's a financial storm. We're also seeing a political storm. We're also seeing social decay. And the earth is literally shaking. We're seeing drought, all these problems. You know, it's a sign that people need to get prepared. You know, they need to store up food. They need to become more independent of the system. They need to put away some money so that they can take care of things if they lose their job, whatever. And I'm going to be focusing on that a lot, on both the Economic Collapse blog and on End of the American Dream. And I don't want people to despair, because even though a storm is coming and things are going to get really, really dark, when things get really, really dark, you know, also, you know, I believe that God also, when the darkness grows, so does the light. And I believe that God is going to do some great things. I'm a believer, and I believe that God is raising up His remnant that will keep His commandments and that will boldly proclaim the message of the gospel. And so there's exciting days ahead. Yes, they're going to be hard, but I urge people to prepare and get ready, because, the light is going to be needed more than ever.
Faith is the important ingredient to get you through everything that we're facing. It sounds to me like what people have for centuries referred to as the apocalypse. Do you view it as Armageddon?
Well, I believe that we are entering the time that the scriptures talk about, refer to as the last days. And so, yeah, I believe that Bible prophecy is being fulfilled, and it will accelerate as we go through our lifetimes. And I believe that judgment is coming to America. It's arrived, but that is going to get a lot worse. And so, I believe we're living in truly historic times when we're going to see more happen in a year than people used to see happen in an entire decade. So people kind of need to strap in and tighten up those safety belts, because it's going to be a wild ride. But, it's also going to be a time when we're going to need people to make a difference, to stand up for the Lord, for the truth, for what's right. And and there's going to be a lot of people that need to be ministered to, because people are going to be looking for answers. When things fall apart, people are going to be in despair. They're going to consider suicide. They're going to go crazy, and they're going to be reaching out looking for some answers. And hopefully we'll have some answers for people when they come looking at us.
Well, thank you very much for doing what you do. Keep on doing it. I think you're doing some great stuff. It's been my privilege to have you on my show today. My friends, we're wrapping up our 4th year on the air. When we come back on Monday, it'll be the beginning of year 5. I'd like to thank the folks at KHNC, Don, Michael, Cody. I'd like to thank Barry Fisher. More than anyone else, I'd like to thank all my listeners, you folks who tune in. It's not easy. You got to turn the volume down, I know, because I tend to get loud. I apologize for that. But you know what? And I'm sure Michael will bear me out on this, when you look into the darkness looks back. And if you're a decent person, and that's all I claim to be, is a decent person, it's got to make you angry at what you see happening, the powers that be abusing their powers, people acting like sheep and allowing it to happen. That's why I do this show. After 4 years, I've never made a dime doing this show. It's a responsibility, and it's one that I continue to hope to continue to fulfill. I'll bid goodbye right now. I'll see you on Monday, my friends. The old advice remains the best advice. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay angry.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, The feasts of the Lord,